Please rise for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Please be seated.
Oh, right behind me.
Welcome.
Councilmember Bardini.
Present.
Councilmember Tatino.
Present.
Councilmember Pristula.
Present.
Councilmember Rye.
Here.
Supervisor Albro.
Here. I got two things to adopt the agenda. I got two items for special consideration. One to deal with New York State retirement for the position of police chief, and one is to waive the fee for tent fees for the office of the agent. I'll make a motion to amend the agenda. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, next up, we'll get right into it, will be my presentation on the burial ground in the town of Fishkill, and I'm going to speak here at the podium to the residents of the town of Fishkill. You ready? Thank you all for coming. This presentation is regarding the Fishkill Supply Depot Revolutionary War Burial Ground Special Presentation, May 13th, 2026. Myself and my confidential secretary, Joseph Perone. Joseph, say hello to everybody. He helped me put this together. Spent many hours, countless hours putting this together, research, and getting this thing done. So we'll start. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ozzie Albright. I'm the supervisor of the town of Fishkill. For decades, there has been a controversy over a piece of property at the corner of Route 9 and Van Wyck Lake Road. While everybody agrees that there is a burial ground on the site, questions remain whether it's a Revolutionary War burial ground or is it a family or servant's plot. I am here today to make a presentation to the town board and the residents of Fishkill regarding this location. I would like to begin by going over the historical record of the site. The first one will be the pictorial field book of the Revolution, which is right there. And that was written by Benson J. Losing, a premier historian of the Revolutionary War. So when you read about the Revolutionary War, this gentleman was the premier historian about the war. And in 1860, his book, Historian of the Revolutionary War, he wrote on page 690, the barracks were about a half mile south of the village, extending along the line of the road to the foot of the mountains. The headquarters of officers were Mr. Van Wyck's, then the property of Mr. Wharton. From this circumstance, it is known as the Wharton House. The burial place of soldiers is at the foot of the mountains where the road of Isaac Van Wyck branches eastward from the turnpike. Okay? Next up is our historical sketch, a directory of the town of Fishkill by James Dean and John W. Spate, prominent historians and local publishers. This is dated 1866, and we'll go to page 84. Near the residence of Mr. Sidney E. Van Wyck, by the black walnut trees and east of the road near the base of the mountain was a soldier's burial ground. Many poor patriot soldiers' bones lie moldering there, and how many, if we did not know this, we should not be startled by the magnitude. This almost unknown, unnoticed burial ground holds not a few, but hundreds of those who gave their lives for the cause of the American independence. Some 15 years ago, an old lady who was then living at an advanced age and who had lived near the village after she had grown to womanhood, told the writer that after the Battle of White Plains, she went to her father through the streets of Fishkill, and in places between the Dutch and the Episcopal Church, the dead were piled up as high as cord wood. These were buried there. The wounded of the battle afterwards died, were buried here. The constant stream of death from the hospitals were buried here. So today, Route 9 goes past Route 52. Back in the day, it ended by those two churches. So when you cross that intersection today, just think in your mind of hundreds of dead soldiers just laying in there in 1776. Next up, we got Washington's headquarters by J.J. Monell, New York State Supreme Court judge. So this gentleman is a New York State Supreme Court judge. He also has a street named in Beacon after him, Monell Place. In 1872, on pages 55 to 56, he wrote the following. This was during the period of greatest destitution in the Army, the winter of 1779 and 80, when Valley Forge was abiding place of famine, and frozen ground was tracked with the blood of frozen feet. Can we wonder what these men sometimes rebelled? Their patriotism was put to a severe test. Indeed, hundreds died here from the efforts of exposure, and their bones yet molder in the grounds which were set apart from the interment at the foot of the mountains. This gentleman was a Supreme Court justice at the time. Next up is Local Tales and Historical Sketches by Henry D.B. Bailey, local historian, 1874, page 191. The soldier's graveyard was at the foot of the mountain, near the residence of Isaac I. Van Wyck. Next book, General History of Dutchess County by Philip H. Smith, 1877, page 189. Near the residence of Sidney Van Wyck by the large black walnut trees and east of the road near the base of the mountain. Just listen, by the large walnut trees by the east road near the base of the mountain was the soldier's burial ground. Many a poor patriot soldier bones lie moldering there. This almost unknown and unnoticed burial place holds hundreds of those who gave their lives for the cause of the American independence. Some 25 years ago, an old lady who was living in Advance A told the writer that after the Battle of the White Plains, again, she went through the streets of Fishkill, in places between the Dutch and Episcopal churches, the dead were piled high as cordwood. Next up is History of Dutchess County, James H. Smith, 1883. That's a map, go back one, Jason. That's a map of the town of Fishkill back in the day, 1858. And if you scrolled into the map, you will see the Van Wicks mentioned on that corner there, on that map. Page 139. Near the residence by the black walnut trees, says Mr. Brickerhoff, before quoted, and east of the road, near the base of the mountain, was a soldier's burial ground. This almost unknown, unnoticed burial ground holds not a few, but hundreds of those who gave their lives for the American independence. Next up is the Fishkill Centennial. So the town of Fishkill celebrated their 100th anniversary, not on the 4th of July, but the day that the American Army left Fishkill, which was June 2nd, 1783. So that's when we celebrated our 100th anniversary.
1883.
I'm sorry?
Isn't it 1883?
Yeah, the 100th anniversary was,
Yes.
they left in
Okay.
1783.
All right, so there's a little here. We'll go to page 6. Again, New York State Supreme Court Judge Monell. Near the Highlands is the Wharton House, same as the Van Wyck House. Forever associated with it, made famous by the Cooper Spy, and just below it, the old neglected burial ground, where so many of those soldiers lie unmarked, which should now have had our special regard. Then we'll go to page 10, again from Judge Monell. We also meet preparatory of the erection of an appropriate monument to honor and perpetuate the memory of all those who died in the encampment and were buried in the Revolutionary graveyard at the foot of the mountain, at the foot of yonder mountain. We go to page 20. New York State Supreme Court Judge Theodoric de R. Westbrook, another New York State Supreme Court judge. The barracks referred to by the writer extended from the place recently occupied by the late Sidney E. Van Wyck to the foot of the mountain, and near it was the soldier's burial place, where many now unknown patriots dead repose. From what cause it was largely filled, let the following extract from the same author, Chalot, a French guy, describe the invalid camp tale. The houses were made of logs and were erected by soldiers. To this place, troops, however healthy and fit for service, were sent. When they became destitute of clothing, they remained at the barracks as long as they had rags and could patch into a covering. But when they became naked, they were sent into this hiding place. So the country was so poor at the time that when the soldiers didn't have clothes and when they died, they stripped them and put them in the burial ground. So that's why there's no evidence of uniforms or anything like that. We'll go to Hervey Cook on page 28 and 29. Hervey Cook was a famous lawyer at the time. We can see the poor soldier huts that were thrust together and plastered in a day. You have not forgotten the invalid corpse in a cave hiding away in those highlands, not having clothes to appear in the light, and you have been moved to the deepest pity by those suffering that were grievous here, the like which were only felt at Valley Forge. In your old churchyard lies the dust of many of your fathers, who won for themselves the patriots' immortal game, but how many were here who died from the wounds and disease in yonder church hospitals, who have long moldered and mingled with Mother Earth in the neglected burial plot down near those mountains, who, though nameless to us, are in the guardianship of those spirits that keep holy watch over their country and ours, whom can never be called by name until the books are opened, in which the recording angel has written the beauty of their heroic lives. They are no longer distinguished by the states which they came, but together as fellow patriots. In the next book, Enoch Crosby, The Spy Unmasked, they also go through the Centennial. There were two newspapers at the time, and they covered them a little bit differently. So we'll go to Judge Theodoric Westbrook with another comment on page 131, which he states, "We also meet preparatory to the erection of an appropriate monument to honor and perpetuate the memory of those who died in the encampment and were buried in the Revolutionary graveyard at the foot of yonder mountain." Page 134. The barracks referred by the writer extended from this place recently occupied by the late Sidney E. Van Wyck to the foot of the mountain and nearby the soldiers' burial place where many now unknown patriots dead repose. From what cause it was largely filled, let the following extract from the same author describing the invalid camp tell. The houses made of log were erected by soldiers. To this place the troops, however healthy and fit for service, were sent. When they became destitute of clothing, they remained at the barracks as long as they had rags, and again could be patched into a covering, but when they became naked, they were sent back to the hiding place. Now we'll go to the Historical Society of Newburgh Bay and the Highlands. This is one of Mr. Judge's, Judge Monell's groups that he belonged to in 1894, page 35. The Wharton House was used by the Army officers generally and had a record of its own, and we have built a little of it in the Cooper Spy. A little below laid away in unmarked graves in that old burial ground where many a true-hearted soldier, whose Lady Percy far away mourned deeply for her love, Hotspur. Many were carried off by disease and suffering born at one time in the camp were very great. A historian writes, clothing became so scarce in the Highlands that a building was erected at Fishkill as a retreat for naked men. Soldiers patched their clothes until patches and clothes both gave out and were sent to this retreat for naked men. Next book, Commemorative Biography of Record of Dutchess County, J.H. Beers, 1897, page 43. By the black walnut trees south of the road at the foot of the mountains was the burial ground of the soldiers. Next book, History of Dutchess County, Frank Hasbrook, 1909. Page 173. The barracks became a retreat for the wounded and naked soldiers. After the Battle of White Plains, the wounded were conveyed to Fishkill, where in addition to the barracks hospital, the churches were used for that purpose. Of the many who died, it is asserted that they were piled up as high as cordwood in the places between the Dutch and Episcopal churches. Near the base of the mountain, a short distance south of the village, is the soldiers' burial ground, where moldered remains of the hundreds of patriots whose devotion and blood helped secure us an estimable boon of liberty. Smallpox, which broke out in the camp, added the bodies of many more. The suffering and privations of those historic men, wrote Washington, ate at one time every kind of horse food but hay. That's how poor it was. They were eating horse food. To further amplify by Marquis de Chalot, who remarks that they were not even covered with rags. General Washington made his headquarters in Fishkill village for brief periods, stopping at the house of Colonel John Bickerhoff. Next up, Historical and Genealogical Record of Dutchess and Putnam Counties, A.V. Haight, 1912, page 10. Near the base of the mountain, a short distance from the village, is a soldier's burial ground where molded the remains of hundreds of patriots whose devotions and blood helped to secure us an estimable boon of liberty. Marquis de Chalot, who remarked that they were not even covered in rags. Page 33. These barracks became the retreat of wounded and naked soldiers. Next up, Yearbook of Dutchess County Historical Society, 1914-1915. Page 16. Just a little beyond the Wharton House, along the left side of the road, is the location of a small granite monument telling of those who lie buried in the adjoining field who gave their lives for their country. Yearbook of Dutchess County, 1916-1918, page 19. Beyond the brook, it's very important, east, brook, corner, foot of the mountains, bam. Beyond the brook to the south of the burial ground of the American Army, one authority states there are more soldiers buried here than any spot across New York State. Old Gravestones of Dutchess County. Now this is a remarkable book here. This guy did all the churchyards and graveyards in Dutchess County. And this guy was a doctor, so his providence is unmatched. He puts up the historical monument, next page. Let's see what he said. I'm sorry, go backwards one.
There.
Okay. The historical monument on the book. And if you can see on the bottom, it says 1776 to 1783, in grateful remembrance of the brave men who gave their lives for their country during the American Revolution and who remained reposed in the adjoining field. Next up, Dutchess County American Guide Series, William Penn, 1937, page 140. Near the base of the mountain, a gray marker by the roadside commemorates a soldier's burial ground. Many of the unrecorded dead were state militiamen. Few cemeteries in the state have many graves of the Revolutionary soldiers as found in this unnoticed spot. Next up, Old Dutchess Forever by Henry Noble McCracken, 1956, pages 365 to 366. Not only the wounded, but the hospitalized soldiers were buried in the base of the mountain east of the high road, Route 9. Now you see everything consistent? East, foot of the mountain, brook. Historical, now we'll get into the historical town record. 1897, Town Board Resolution. In 1897, the Town Board authorized the erection of the monument to be placed on Mr. Knapp's property, and that's pretty significant. Next up, comprehensive plan dated August 2009, page 23, section E, says clearly, this is a comprehensive plan from 2009. I wasn't the supervisor at the time. Work with representatives of New York State, the federal government, and interested parties to purchase or otherwise preserve portions of the historic Fishkill Supply Depot lands that remain undeveloped and explore how these lands can be best used to commemorate the activities that occurred on these hallowed grounds, especially the lands where grave sites of former soldiers have been identified. This was almost 20 years ago and nobody moved on this. This is important. This comprehensive plan is voted by the town board after public input. Let's go to the archaeological record because some people say there is none. That right there is the corner today. If you can see toward Route 9, might be able to see a little square. You guys see that? You see the granite? Okay, we'll get back to that in a little bit. In 2007, Greenhouse Consultants discovered 8 burials, bless. Harkin found in 2013 6 additional graves for a total of 14 burials. Then John Miller 2009 study, which found 300 anomalies, are all indicative of burials. What is important about these studies is only adult graves were found. Only adult graves were found. No children were found, even though the mortality rate was very high during this time period. Remains are at the site are in large numbers. In addition, during the early period of the war, when there were economic struggles with the fledgling nation, deceased Continental soldiers were stripped of clothing, shoes, and other possible artifacts as they had been reused and reissued to other soldiers, preventing these items from being found, as I described above. Clothing became so scarce in the highlands that a building was erected in Fishkill as a retreat for naked men. Soldiers patched their clothes until patches and clothes both gave out, and they were sent to this retreat for naked men. This is why you don't see any clothing items in that graveyard, in that burial ground. Now, there are allegedly other possible locations of the burial ground, so I did my due diligence and we checked on that. The Roundabout Rural Cemetery was an alleged spot, and there was a vacant area in the cemetery that was a church that burned down in 1866. According to the Dutchess County Historical Society yearbook in 1947, page 28 states, during the Revolutionary War, the church was used as a hospital, and soldiers that died there were buried in a row near the old hitching post. This is a common practice. They're buried in all the churches in the town of Fishkill. Although this was common practice throughout the Revolutionary War, that soldiers were buried next to a hospital. On August 27th, 2023, the Roundabout Rural Cemetery posted on Facebook the following statement. There is history documented, diaries, etc., about the use of the Presbyterian church that once stood in the middle of the Roundabout Rural Cemetery and the encampments that surrounded the building, the Revolutionary War. Regarding any mass cemetery, the facts are a ground-penetrating radar study was performed some years ago, paid for by an anonymous donor. Though some anomalies were found as a result, there was and is no definite proof of any mass grave, soldiers or otherwise. To date, there has been no archaeological or anthropological investigations performed. Therefore, there is no empirical evidence date proving such claim. We at the RRC would very much appreciate this opinion not to be perpetuated further. Okay? Then we go to the Trinity Church. The church was also a hospital during the Revolutionary War, and it treated over 1,700 soldiers during this period. Think about that. A little church right here in Fishkill, and that church is not big. I'm sure a bunch of you have been in it. It's very small. During this period from the Battle of the White Plains, according to the founding of the Episcopal Church in 1894, page 34, it states some soldiers were buried individually, but there was no documentation of a mass burial ground. Across from the Van Wyck House There's some alleged allegations that across from that Van Wyck house on the 84 off-ramp, that they were buried there. But when the state built the interchange, they found no graves, period. Across the street, there was an excavation in 1971, and no human remains were found. Go back one, Jason. So this is, I'm sorry, man. 1971, the corner, you can see the corner right on the bottom, right across the street where the curve is, they excavated that area. No graves were found, period. You guys see that? Next page. This is the monument that sat there for almost 100 years. It's a beautiful monument. It's a Quincy marble from Massachusetts. The women of Fishkill worked their tails off to get this dedicated. And it says, again, 1776, 1783, 13 stars, in grateful remembrance of the brave men who gave their lives for their country during the American Revolution and whose remains repose. That means they're there in the adjoining field. And it was erected by the Melzinga chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution, October 14th, 1897. This monument is right there at the Van Wyck house today. And when you read it, you would think it's the off-ramp. That's where these graves are. So you see how history gets lost by misinformation? All right, go back. No, I didn't say change. Go back to the other one. Nope. Go back to the monument. Okay. So I'm going to ask the town board, when if I'm fortunate enough to get the town board to vote on my resolution tonight, I want to do a replica of that and stop at the adjoining field, and then and at the bottom it'll say this stone is erected by the people of the town of Fishkill this year in the 250th anniversary. That's what I'm going to be asking the town board to do. Thank you. All right. They claim an area on Route 9 south of Snook Road to Putnam County line. The historical road shows no burial ground in that area or any of the mentioned site. What's curious is that some people have said they wouldn't bury soldiers next to a creek or a stream, but they're buried across the street south, and guess what runs through that road? A creek that's bigger than the other one. So I want to put that in perspective. And there's no record of any graves. Now let's go to the DAR monument, where we're at right there, that it represented the entire war dead. That's what some people are saying. On October 14th, 1897, the Daughters of the American Revolution, with a town board resolution and permission from Albert Knapp, the property owner who erected a monument to honor those who lie in repose in the burial ground. The stone is described with the following: 1776, 1783, in grateful remembrance of the brave men who gave their lives for their country during the American Revolution and whose remains repose in the adjoining field. The stone is erected by the Melzinga chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, October 14th, 1897. In 1897, Route 9 was a small dirt road, not the superhighway that you see today. The monument was allegedly placed on the western portion of the road across from the Van Wyck Lake Road on the site of the burial ground, approximately only 30 feet away. Of important note is this property is also owned by Albert Knapp. The guy owned both sides of the road. Knapp was given permission to place the monument. Due to the advent of the automobile, Route 9 was expanded west of the burial ground. So everybody that loves your history and the war dead, they went west. They did not go over east, which would have encroached. But in my opinion, maybe when they did Van Wyck Lake Road, there might be someone underneath Van Wyck Lake Road. It's a possibility. Of important note, due to the advent of the automobile, Route 9 was expanded west, and the monument was moved to the eastern portion of Route 9 on the corner of Van Wyck Lake Road around 1905. The monument remained there until the early 1970s, where it was moved to the Van Wyck House, about a half-mile north of the area where it currently remains today, in a safe location. The movement was done to further road improvements. Claims have been made that this monument was dedicated to all of Fishkill's war dead. That can't be true. Because why would the town let a monument be placed in a remote area with less than 1% of the population? Think about that. With limited transportation at the time. For example, our World War II monument is dead center in the village of Fishkill, where everybody can see it. So why would you put a monument in the middle of nowhere? Makes no sense. Why would a property allow a monument dedicated to war dead to be placed on a property if the owner did not believe it was true? Think about that. Additionally, the western portion was excavated in 1971-72. No bodies were found. In 2007, bodies were found across the street at the corner of Van Wyck Lake Road and Route 9D. Okay, so the archaeological record is pretty strong here, guys. Now we're going to go to the Duke of York laws. Okay, stop, go back one. So go back 3 more. Go back to those little snippets. So we have here, the Daughters of the American Revolution did a little scrapbook that's in the Beacon Library of the newspaper at the Times. They all did a little montage, and this is what it says, a couple of these snippets. But no longer may historians rebuke us, for through the courtesy of Mr. Albert Knapp, who owned the property on both sides of the road, guys, remember that, both sides of the road, the owner of the land and the highway commissioner, in permitting the placing of the stone on this spot, through the great kindness of our friends in aiding us financially and helped us with sympathy of the whole community, we now, as members of the Melzenga chapter of the DAR, lift this flag from this memorial stone, which we this day consecrate in grateful remembrance to those brave men who gave their lives for their country and their bodies repose in the adjoining field. Next one. It was November in 1895 that 12 ladies in the village assembled together for the purpose of forming a society of the Daughters of the American Revolution. The society was named Melzenga Chapter, and these 12 ladies were charter members. Yesterday, the members of the society unveiled the handsome monument on Cold Spring Road to make the spot where hundreds of brave soldiers who fought for their country's liberty lie buried. It was a patriotic deed by patriotic women. Next. The subject of the monument was first broached by a church centennial in 1883. We talked about that earlier, right? But it was not until the women descendants took the matter in charge and everything was done. Ms. Verplank briefly reviewed the work of the chapter and unveiled the monument. Her address was an able one, and the assembly grasped every word eagerly. Next. Okay, this is 1905. Here's the monument. You see the bottom? You see the granite? Everybody see the granite on the bottom of the monument? You guys see that, right? Mm-hmm. Go back to that page that I told you to. Right there. See the square? That's something, isn't it? Still remains there today. The truth matters, facts matter. Go back to the front. Go back to where we left off. Okay, next page. Next one. I believe those are walnut trees going down the road. And people said Fishkill didn't do anything for them. They did do something. That's a beautiful stone wall. Making those walnut trees takes a long time to do that. Our forefathers and foreladies protected the site. They did do something, and I just wanted to point that out, that it wasn't just neglected. It just didn't get the full recognition that it deserved. Next. Okay, now we're on to the colonial laws of New York. This is a good one. On February 18th, 2026, the property owner attended a town board meeting, and at the 7:15 p.m. mark of the meeting, made a claim that the graves belonged to the Van Wyck family. He then attended the March 4th, 2026 town board meeting, and at the 7:34 p.m. mark, stated the burials were before the Revolution, and that there were no artifacts to prove that there was a Revolutionary burial ground. In this presentation, you can see why there are no artifacts, as the colonial army were poor and the soldiers were stripped of clothing and equipment for reuse. I took the developer's claim seriously and researched the claims and came across the colonial laws of New York from 1664 to the Revolution. These laws were called the Duke of York laws. These laws made it very clear that all burials, including servants, aka slaves, were to be recorded by the church or local government as referenced on page 19 and 20. There was a filing fee for the recording and even a larger penalty if you failed to record a burial. The Van Wyck family was a prominent family in this period and had burial plots in the Dutch Reformed Church and another church in Hopewell just north of Fishkill that have a beautiful vault. All those burials were properly recorded in accordance with the Duke of York laws. Upon review of all the records, we were unable to locate any burial of any Van Wyck family member or servants buried at the corner of Van Wyck Lake Road and Route 9. Truth matters, facts matter. In conclusion, I would like to read the following quote. To be killed in war is not the worst that can happen. To be lost is not the worst that can happen. To be forgotten is the worst. That's Pierre Claessens. He was a young boy in Belgium during the First World War. He emigrated to the United States after and was an advocate for veterans for the rest of his life. He suffered as a young kid and saw what America did for him. And I think that's a poignant quote. So today, I'm asking the members of the town board here tonight to show the same courage and resolve that the town board of 1897 had shown and affirmed by a vote that this site of the site is the site of a Revolutionary burial ground, and in doing so, we can ensure that these brave souls will never be forgotten. That's it. Okay, next up is the resolution. I'm going to start reading it. I believe Councilwoman Bardini, you're a driver of it. Who was the second?
Can we have a couple of questions before we
Absolutely.
have a start at it?
Well, are they related to the resolution, or are they related to the supervisor's presentation?
I'll get into it. Give me a second.
Just thinking procedurally, if they're related to the resolution should be read, moved, and seconded, and then a discussion proceeds.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're going to have discussion on the resolution, but I'm not sure if you're talking about the resolution yet or the discussions about the presentation. If it's about the resolution, you should go through it. Somebody will make the motion, it'll be seconded, presumably, and then you would have discussion
Okay.
on the resolution.
Let's read it.
Are we going to read in full?
I'm going to read the whole thing.
Okay.
A resolution declaring and dedicating a Revolutionary War Soldiers Burial Ground at the northeast corner of Van Wyck Lake Road. The special meeting of the town board of the town of Fishkill, Dutchess County, New York, held at the Francis R. Cross Meeting Room, 807 Route 52, Fishkill, New York, on the 13th day of May, 2026 at 7 p.m. The meeting was called to order by Ozzie Albert, supervisor, and upon roll being called, the following were present: all our board members, Jackie Bardini, Greg Totino, Councilman Basula, and Councilman Rye. The following resolution was introduced by Council Member Bardini, and who did the second? You were Don.
I believe
Don?
Councilman.
So this was introduced by Councilwoman Bardini and seconded by Councilmember Pizzula. Whereas during the American Revolution, the town of Fishkill served as one of the most significant military, logistical, and medical centers in New York State, including barracks, hospitals, supply depots, headquarters, and extended encampments for the continental and state forest. And whereas historical sources spanning more than a century, including the works by Benson J. Losing, 1860, James E. Dean, and John W. Spate, 1866, J.J. Monell, 1872, Henry D.B. Bailey, 1874, Philip H. Smith, 1877, James H. Smith, 1882, and subsequent historians consistently describe a soldier's burial ground located at the base of the mountain east of the historic Albany Post Road and approximately of the Van Wyck residence and Fishkill encampment area. And whereas the sources uniformly record that hundreds of soldiers died at Fishkill from wounds, disease, exposure, and smallpox, and were interned in the burial grounds associated with military hospitals and encampments during the period of 1776 through 1783. And whereas the town board of the town of Fishkill formally recognized the presence and significance of Revolutionary War burials in this area by resolution dated September 25th, 1897, authorizing the Melzinga chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution to erect a monument commemorating Revolutionary War deads whose remains repose in the adjoining field. And whereas said monument was dedicated on October 14th, 1897, and bears the inscription expressly stating that it honors the brave men who gave their lives for their country during the American Revolution and whose remains repose in the adjoining field. And whereas the archaeological investigations conducted within the vicinity of the northeast corner of the Van Wyck Lake Road have identified multiple burial features and confirmed human remains consistent with documented historic practices and reflection of professional archaeological findings and reports. Whereas the historical record demonstrates that during the Revolutionary War period, deceased soldiers were frequently buried without clothing, equipment, or identifying artifacts due to extreme shortages, reuse of military supplies, and emergency burial conditions associated with wartime hospitals and epidemics. And whereas colonial laws governing burial practices distinguish from private family burials and public burials, and the historical evidence does not support the existence of recorded private family burials of the type of scale at this location consistent with the laws in effect of the time. And whereas the town's 1962 comprehensive plan recognizes the historical significance of Fishkill as a major location of the Revolutionary War encampments, supply depots, and medical facilities, and acknowledges the town's responsibility to preserve lands shaped by historic events and long-standing public use. And whereas the Town of Fishkill Comprehensive Plan dated February 14th, 1743, emphasized the importance of community identity, public awareness, and recognition of the town's historical and cultural foundations, and encourages town actions that foster understanding of the town's development, heritage, and shared history as part of its long-range planning philosophy. Whereas the Town of Fishkill Comprehensive Plan update adopted by the Town Planning Board on January 12, 1989, emphasizes that the recognition of the historical cultural resources, including long-standing community institutions and burial places, contributes to the town's identity, continuity, and collective understanding of its development over time, and supports town action intended to foster such awareness without constitution land use regulation. And whereas the Town of Fishkill Comprehensive Plan adopted by the Town Board on September 23, 2009, emphasized scenic and historical stewardship as essential to maintaining the town's unique sense and place, and expressly identifies the preservation and commemoration of historic archaeological resources as town objectives, including lands associated with the Fishkill Supply Depot, Revolutionary War encampments, and sites where grave sites of former soldiers have been identified as a means of fostering civic identity, public awareness, and respect to the town's history. Remember, I was not supervisor in 2009. I did not write this. Whereas the Town Board of the Town of Fishkill adopted the Town Comprehensive Plan on May 23rd, which reaffirms the town's commitment to preserving and commemorating its historic, cultural, and archaeological resources as integral elements of the community identity and civic heritage. And whereas the 2023 Comprehensive Plan update emphasizes scenic and historic stewardship, including the protection, interpretation, and commemoration of historic sites and culturally significant landscapes, and recognizes that such resources contribute to the community character, public education, and understanding of our town's history. And whereas the comprehensive plan update supports identification, protection, and appropriate treatment of historic and archaeological sites, including burial grounds and areas documented of historical significance, and encourages respectful approaches and emphasizes preservation, public awareness, and interpretive or commemorative use rather than intensive redevelopment. And whereas the town board finds the actions intended to recognize, commemorate, and preserve historical burial grounds or related historical resources are consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies set forth in the 2023 Comprehensive Plan update, and advance the town's long-standing responsibility for historic and cultural stewardship as a matter of public guidance and commemoration rather than land use regulation. And whereas the Comprehensive Plan specifically calls for the town to work with New York State, the federal government, and the interested parties to preserve and commemorate portions of the historically significant lands, and to interpret activities occurring on what are described as hallowed grounds, particularly those involving the burial of Revolutionary War soldiers. Whereas the town board finds that this property consisting of a generally defined area approximately squared in a square shape of plus negative 0.4 acres located in the northeastern intersection of Elmwood Lake Road and the New York State Route 9 commemoration site lies within the historic landscape associated with the Fishkill encampments and barracks and the burial grounds described in both the historic and archaeological record. And whereas in the year 2026 marks the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States following the adoption of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, an event of singular national and historical significance commemorating throughout the country as the United States semi-quincentennial. And whereas this historical milestone has prompted national, state, and local governments to undertake initiatives that recognize and honor the people, places, and events that shaped the nation's founding and early history, with particular emphasis on historic sites, landscapes, burial grounds, and places of remembrance that embody the sacrifices, struggles, and the lived experience of earlier generations. Whereas the town board finds that dedicating the commemorative, historical, significant land and burial sites within the town at the time carries heightened meaning and public value, providing an appropriate and lasting tribute to educational resources in conjunction with the nation's 250th anniversary, and reinforcing the town's commitment to historic preservation, education, and civic reflection. And whereas the town board further finds that formally recognizing and dedicating the commemorative site as a Revolutionary War soldiers' burial ground is consistent with prior town actions, long-standing commemorative practice, the town's planning policies, and public interest in honoring those who died in service during the founding of our nation. And whereas the town board makes this determination as a legislative act of historical recognition and preservation, and not as an adjudicative or quasi-judicial determination based upon a good faith review of the historical, documentary, and historical record. All right, so I'm going to read the resolves, and then we're going to have a discussion. Now therefore it be resolved by the town board as follows. Section 1, all whereas paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference as those set forth in full. Last page. There's a lot here. Section 2, the town board of the town of Fishkill hereby declares and dedicates the commemorative site described herein as a Revolutionary War soldiers' burial ground. Section 3, this designation is adopted for commemorative, educational, preservation purposes and does not constitute a judicial finding regarding individual burials, identifies ownership interests, private property interests, or beyond the town's municipal authority, nor does it affect or imply any taking, we're not taking anything, conveyance, encumbrance, or alteration or title of real property. Section 4, the town supervisor is authorized to coordinate with appropriate town departments, historical organizations, government entities to memorialize this dedication in a manner consistent with the town's comprehensive plan and preservation objectives, including but not limited to working with the town highway department where appropriate and the New York State Department of Transportation to place appropriate signage near the commemorative site location. Section 5, the town board reaffirms its commitment to the respectful preservation and interpretation of the Revolutionary War sites within the town of Fishkill, particularly as the nation approaches the 250th anniversary of the American independence. Section 6, the town supervisor and any other officer, employee, or consultant as directed by the town supervisor is hereby authorized to take any and all actions necessary to carry out the provisions of this resolution. Section 7, this resolution shall be effective immediately. So, Councilman, you wanted to speak?
Well, it's kind of moot now. I mean, I did have a series of questions, but I think you've kind of covered them. I know that there are those out there that are concerned about property rights, and this resolution, just to say it plainly and openly, does nothing to affect the gentleman's ownership, rights to continue his project, etc. We're talking about a section of the property, correct, that has already been designated in his approval plans with the planning board as a burial site. Are we correct on all that?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that this, of course, as you know, I talked to you about a couple of tweaks, but this has already been taken to court, this resolution.
So let's let Mr. Nugent explain.
Well, let me just introduce that. Before we could even have a hearing and a vote or anything else, unfortunately, GLD3, I won't name anyone's name in particular, took this to court, and it was readily, not, thrown out. So, if you could elaborate a bit more, I think it speaks well to the resolution.
Sure. Thank you, Councilman. Yeah, so just to be clear, this wasn't new litigation. There has been ongoing litigation since 2021 by the plaintiff entities GLD3, LLC, and Snook 9 Realty Incorporated. So I'll call them the plaintiffs. So the plaintiffs on Monday filed an application for a TRO, which stands for a temporary restraining order, seeking to stop the town board from considering this resolution and from having this particular meeting to consider the resolution. The town filed opposition papers yesterday, and the judge ordered all the parties to be in court this morning at 11 o'clock. I was present there along with Jim Randazzo, who represented the town in this matter. And basically there was an oral argument. Predominantly it was the judge questioning the plaintiff's attorney about the relief they were seeking. And the judge had a very difficult time because, as was just pointed out, he indicated the development's still approved, the property's already been preserved, and this resolution doesn't affect any regulatory action or anything impacting the property ownership. So After, more or less an hour in court, the judge read a decision from the bench, which is quite common in federal court, denying the TRO and also denying, to the extent it was requested, a preliminary injunction. And so a preliminary injunction follows a TRO. The temporary relief would only be for a week or two, and then the parties would submit more papers. And if a preliminary injunction is granted, that stays in place during the entirety of the case. But this morning, the judge indicated in his decision that to the extent they were even seeking to pursue a preliminary injunction, that relief was also denied. And that was pretty much the summary of the proceeding.
Okay, any other questions, Brian?
No, I mean, when we get to the vote, I'm going to have a little statement to read before I cast my vote.
Okay. Jackie, you can present it.
Thank you. During this year, when we celebrate our 250th anniversary of our country's founding, it seems fitting to sponsor this resolution. It was during the American Revolution that Fishkill earned its greatest historical significance. Known as the crossroads of the colonies, the town became one of the most important military hubs of the war. General George Washington ordered a massive supply depot and encampment built there, one that sustained the Continental Army with weapons, uniforms, provisions, and strategic coordination. So as our supervisor said, facts are important, and there are a number of facts that come up over and over and over again. Some important facts are, number one, during the early years of the Revolution, we were economically struggling to provide clothing for soldiers. So it's no surprise that there is a lack of physical evidence that soldiers are buried there. Soldiers' uniforms were reused or out of necessity. Artifacts such as buttons of a uniform should not be expected to be found. Two, likewise, it is not surprising that this cannot be the Van Wyck burial ground. The family had money and it could afford expensive headstones. Surely there would be a marker of some sort if such a prominent family member was buried here. Also consider the Duke of York laws and the records kept by churches and municipalities. Three, the lack of mention of children also indicates that there were not families buried here. The high rate of child and infant mortality of the time, there would have been children's bones found. None have been found. Four, among historical references discussed by the supervisor, they're all well-educated people, Supreme Court judges, attorneys, and historical writers. They all consistently discuss the area south of the village on the left or east side of Route 9, and at the foot of the mountain, and the granite marker and those who lie buried in the adjoining field. Five, in fact, despite the construction in the area, the Route 9 widening, the building of I-84, no bodies were ever recovered during these projects. Bones, however, were found at the corner in 2007 at the corner of Van Wyck Road and Route 9. Therefore, in keeping with the 1897 board resolution, numerous comprehensive plans to preserve portions of the historical Fishkill Supply Depot and the historical significance of this 250th anniversary of our country's founding. I believe that it's fit that this town board honor those who gave all so that we as a nation exist today. Thank you.
All right, Don, you're the second. You go next.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a newcomer to this, and I wasn't a part of any of the actions that happened prior to January of this year. But I've read every word of the opponent's documents that he's provided to the board. I've done my own research. A lot of my research has collaborated with Supervisor Albra. And I think I have a right to say that. Research is kind of my background. I have background in social science research. I taught research methods and statistics to TAC officers at West Point. So I think I have a right in saying that I know a little bit about research. In research, social science research, there's rarely an absolute You're lucky if you can say I'm 95 or 97% sure that my findings are accurate. Social science research is often reversed. We find one thing 1 year, 10 years later, we find it's no longer true. But you stand the chance of making an error. Type 1 error is a false positive. We say that this is the burial ground, but it really isn't. Type 2 error, false negative, we say it's not a burial ground, but it really is. And I'm not willing to take that risk. If there is one soldier buried in that property that we're not respecting for what they have given so that we in 2026 cannot understand what they went through. We can't possibly, in our lifestyle, understand what it was like to be in a barracks in Fishkill in 1776 and living with the disease around them everywhere. We have to move on to this. We have to respect, and my vote will be that we cannot take the chance that we are making a mistake of number 2. Thank you.
Councilman Totino.
Well said. Well said, and thank you both for sponsoring and co-sponsoring this. As we are celebrating 250 years, I am thinking a lot of our nation's founding. About 15 years ago, a much younger and much skinnier me took to the stage in Rhinebeck in a production of 1776. At the climax of that play, the delegate with the deciding vote in American independence is told by Ben Franklin, "Choose carefully. Every map maker in the world is waiting for your answer." And I suppose that as we cast our votes tonight, everyone here and everyone in our community, regardless of their opinions or their beliefs about a matter which has been up for debate for some years now, will reach their own conclusions about our decision. But I would like to preface mine with a few remarks, and I hope that you'll bear with me. The party told you to reject the evidence of your own eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. George Orwell wrote that in his masterpiece, 1984. And I feel like I'm being asked to ignore the evidence of my eyes and ears when I'm being asked to call this property a family burial ground. I'm being asked to ignore 160 years of consistent historical record, including accounts from people who lived in the Revolutionary War in Fishkill, firsthand accounts that describe a burial ground of Revolutionary War soldiers on the post road 1 mile south of the village, to the east at the foot of the mountain. If we had done our due diligence and found that there was no burial ground there, I think this would be pretty open and shut. But it just so happens there is one there. That is not a matter of debate. The property owner acknowledges it. It's been documented. But a new theory has been put forward. And to explain my background on that theory, I need to talk about something I don't generally talk about in public, which is my faith. I don't make a public spectacle of my religion or my faith because I think it's both unbecoming and at times disingenuous for an elected official or a politician to make spectacle of religious practice. But for about 25 years, I have been a member, as has Supervisor Albra, of the First Reformed Church at the corner of 52 and Route 9. If you're unfamiliar with exactly which one I'm referring to, it's the one with the tall steeple, because there are two catty-corner to each other. As a nerdy and not athletic child, I took a great interest in the history of our church, including the history of our cemetery. And by the time I was in high school, I was actually giving guided tours of the cemetery during the Hudson River Ramble, which was a long-standing historical initiative to get people out to our historic sites. If anyone is interested in receiving a tour, I'd be happy to schedule one. You can email me. That's a matter for a different time. But the church churchyard has a few hundred burials in it, and a lot of them are Van Wycks. The Van Wycks were, in a word, loaded. They were the Elon Musks of Dutchess County in the second half of the 18th century, between the brother who was a merchant and the brother who was a lawyer, and the brother whose property was used as a barracks and supply depot. The family was about as rich as you could possibly get. And while it was not uncommon for families to bury their loved ones in a small family plot, that's not what you did when you had money. And the Van Wycks had more of it than they really knew what to do with. They largely funded the expansion of my church to the size that it is now. And a large number of them are buried in that cemetery with individual gravestones carved by incredibly well-known stone cutters like John Zuricher. The stone from him would have been exorbitantly expensive, but the family could afford it because they were that rich. There's also, from the 1800s, a crypt, a plot, a small hill upon which I, as a child, would play in the churchyard, not knowing what it was, that contains the Van Wyck family from the 1800s. Their money was never in question. The other thing that always strikes me about my churchyard cemetery is that you can't walk down a row without finding a child. About 40 to 50% of burials from the late 1700s were children. And it didn't matter if you were rich or poor, because in a world before we understood what bacteria and viruses were, in a world before vaccines and penicillin, your likelihood after being born of reaching your first birthday was about 65%. And if you did, you had a fairly good chance of reaching adulthood, but that wasn't a given either. So to be crystal clear, a burial ground with 13 to 15 confirmed burials in a time where 40 to 50% of burials would be children should have 5 to 7 children in it. For it to have fewer than that would be understandable, but to have none is the statistical equivalent of flipping a coin and getting heads 15 times. I'm being asked to reject the evidence of my eyes and ears. I'm trying as best I can to remove emotion from this analysis, because we have, over the last several months, heard very passionate testimony and evidence, people on every perspective on this issue, bringing forward the material they have in the hope of persuading us one way or the other. I don't have the luxury of being able to be passionate about this. You need to be objective and you need to be analytical if you're going to serve your constituents well. And it is based entirely upon a historical record that goes back as far as our nation does, weighed against the claims of an individual who has admittedly, and as has been litigated many times in court, a significant interest in persuading us that that record is incorrect. I'm being asked to reject the evidence, but I don't.
Well said, Councilman. Councilman Rye, you're the last one.
I recognize there is still disputes by many regarding whether there is definitive archaeological proof of that Revolutionary soldiers are buried at the site. At the same time, it's also undisputed that the area was part of the larger Fishkill Supply Depot region during the Revolutionary War era, one of the most significant military logistical areas in the country during that time. Thousands of soldiers, workers, camp followers, and civilians moved through the region. For me, this vote is not about politics, publicity, or the upcoming 250th anniversary celebrations. It's about exercising caution and respect where human remains and historically sensitive ground may exist. As someone whose family has personally experienced the sacrifice of military service, I do not take matters involving burial grounds lightly. However, I want to be clear that my vote is not based on emotion. It's based on the principle that when there is credible historical context and the possibility that a site may contain graves connected to an important chapter of American history, local government has a responsibility to err on the side of dignity, preservation, and respect. I also believe preservation and responsible development are not mutually exclusive. The burial area is already protected from disturbance, and recognizing the historical sensitivity of the site does not necessarily prevent the surrounding property from becoming an economically productive and even educational asset to the town. In fact, thoughtful interpretation of the area's Revolutionary War history could enhance heritage, tourism, and public understanding of Fishkill's important role in the founding of this nation. Therefore, while I acknowledge the differing opinions surrounding the exact nature of burials, I believe this resolution is an appropriate and measured recognition of a site that is sacred ground.
Okay. Councilwoman Bardini made the motion. Councilman Brazula seconded it. Roll call vote. Mr. Clerk.
All right. Councilmember Bardini,
Aye.
Councilmember Totino,
Aye.
Councilmember Pristula,
Aye.
Councilmember Rye,
Aye.
Supervisor Albrecht.
Aye. Motion passes.
Unanimously.
Good job. Awesome. Great job. Okay, just give me like a couple minutes and I'll be done with this. Next up is items for special consideration. Anybody got a question about the waiving of the 10 fee for the Office of the Agent event?
No, not at all.
Now therefore be resolved that the town board in the town of Fishkill, after careful consideration of the request, waives the required tent fee for the event. I'm going to present that as motion. Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next up is a resolution for the town, next up is resolution for the town board to authorize home rule request to amend the New York State Retirement and Social Security law. We have an issue in the town of Fishkill where we run a 24/7 police organization, and we staff it with part-time officers, and we found an extraordinary executive, our chief, Stratner, and we're looking to see if we can get the state to give him a waiver so he's not stuck at the $35,000 amount. Trust me, he works way more than that.
That he does.
He does. Everybody okay with that?
Hell yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now therefore, it is resolved, the town board has filed the whereas claims incorporated herein as set forth in full. The town board of the town of Fishkill authorizes and adopts and approves home rule requests for the enactment of Senate Bill SAM 10231 and Assembly Bill Adam 11132, which entitled An Act to amend the Retirement Social Security Law in relation to allowing Christopher Stratton, a retired police officer, to serve as police chief of the town of Fishkill Police Department without diminution of retirement benefits. Section 3, the town, Fishkill Town Board, and determines that necessity exists for the enactment of such legislation, and thus facts establish such necessity are that the town does not have the power to enact such legislation by local law. Section 4, the town of Fishkill Town Clerk is hereby authorized and empowered and to direct, sign and file in the New York State Assembly and the Senate the appropriate home rule bills. Section 5, the supervisor and any officer, employee, or consultant as directed by the supervisor is hereby directed to take any and all actions necessary to carry out the provisions of this resolution, including execution of any documents necessary to carry out the home rule request. Section 6, this resolution shall be effective immediately. I present that as a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next town board meeting. All right. I want to cancel the next town board meeting, which is next Wednesday. Everybody okay with that?
Second.
Yeah.
So how do I cancel the next week's meeting?
You just make a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to cancel the May 20th town board meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
Councilman Rye, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the next town board meeting, what, be June 2nd?
June 3rd.
June 3rd? Next town board meeting will be June 3rd, right here at 7 o'clock. There is no executive session. I'll make a motion for adjournment. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, done.